Now I'm just doing a landscape drawing here, and what I'm using is a reed pen. Now the reed pen was actually the first form of pen to be created. In fact, it was around 5,000 years ago in Samaria, which is now Iraq, that people would create a point from a reed and use it to carve into clay tablets. It was the ancient Egyptians, however, who created ink and used it to dip their pen into and then scribe onto papyrus. It wasn't until years later that artists discovered how great the reed pen was as a drawing tool. Rembrandt, for example, who used it for great, quick, fluent lines in some of his sketches. He would also use a brush to add washes of ink to certain areas. The artist who's probably most famous for using a reed pen, however, was Vincent van Gogh, or Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, depending on how you pronounce it. And in his drawings, he used a whole range of different sorts of mark making. The other thing that was great about the reed pen for him was the fact that it was free. The reason it was free was because he could create it himself. And if, like him, you wanted to make your own, you would need to start by going back into the landscape itself. Now to find the reeds that you're after, you'll need to travel to low-lying marshlands. There you'll find row upon row of reeds along the water's edge. They can be picked at any time of the year, but in order to find your ideal reed, I'll take you back further to a cold, quiet winter's morning. During the winter, the reeds will be dormant and therefore much drier and ideal for cutting and drawing with. For Van Gogh, he would have used a penknife to cut his reed low down before taking it away, ready to start carving a nib. And when it came to creating the nib, he would have firstly needed to get rid of any of the loose excess material around the outside before using the same penknife to start cutting a first scoop cut into the end of the reed. Now, using his thumb to get good control over the blade, he would cut in at an angle, which would then flatten out towards the end. He would then use the knife to refine the edges and sculpt it into a neat point. This in itself would be enough to start drawing with it, although what you find is many reed pens have a second cut which starts slightly further up, and this one would go in at an angle to about halfway down and then in a straight line along the pen towards the nib. Now the pointed nib that I've carved here will be great for fine, detailed lines, but if I wanted to achieve slightly wider mark making, then I'd need to cut the nib accordingly. This can be done by placing the pen onto a flat, firm surface and using the same knife to cut the nib to the width of your choice. It can be straight across or at a slight angle. The knife could also be used to create a small hole just back from the tip, and this will help retain more ink. Instead of just pushing it through, I'm easing it in, doing a circular motion, gradually carving out the hole without making any damage to the nib. And the final thing you could do to help the pen retain more ink is to create a split joining the hole and the tip. Now this is something that you might see more commonly in Arabic calligraphy pens, and in order to make the most effective split, it's best, instead of using the knife to cut all the way to the tip, push in from the hole and create the split naturally. It's worth trying out these different sorts of nibs yourself and seeing which one works best for you. But personally I find it's best to go for a simple cut with just the addition of the hole. It's well worth creating a nib at either end of your pen too. A sharper end for thinner detailed lines and a wider end for those thicker marks. And so once you've carved your pen, you have your ink and your paper, you'll be ready to begin your drawing adventure. Of course, you could just buy one in a shop, but where's the fun in that?